This will be a little bit of a journey. We want to share what we experienced the last year and hopefully bring some interesting things for you. Maybe half of the part will be about the journey and what we learned, and half of the part will be, okay, this is something you could copy paste and use for yourself, probably. And then the other half of the hour we want to discuss with you, like what's interesting there.
So does it work? Yeah, it works. Okay. So yeah, let's start. And well, I'm going to go back. So little disclaimer, I'm from Quebec City. He's from Switzerland. We don't have a lot of opportunity to test things live. So it's going to go the way it's going to go. But we've been working a lot on this presentation. Okay. So let's start with that famous tale that you've probably seen dozens of times by now, that you probably all know. Who does not know the tale of the 5 blind men and the elephants? So I will make it just quick. So it's a little story about 5 blind men that, well, they didn't see the elephant, obviously, because they're blind, but there's an elephant. And all the blind people touches the elephant. And one say an elephant is like a snake because the person touched the tail. And the other one says the elephant is like a spear because they touched the horn. I don't know if it's not a horn on the, but you get it. Another one say it's like a big touch the ears, and it says like a, I don't know in English, but it's something else. And it's actually the same tale and the same thing that we do in our enterprises. Is usually when we go and have a problem, every discipline have kind of their own take on what the problem is and what the solution could be. And this is what we're trying to tackle with StratEDGY. And the thing is, when you read the tale, there's a couple of versions. There's no clear way or definition how the 5 blind men agreed on what it is really. And if they do, it's kind of a, yeah, let's agree on something. So what we try to tackle today is this, but to solve it for real. How can everybody have the same elephant at the end? So how do we solve the challenge?
Has anybody an idea how those 7 or more or less people figured out if it's an elephant or something else? That's their challenge.
They speak together.
Mathieu? Yeah. Should I bring the mic up to you, or can you speak out loud? Remove the blind.
So no more people.
Yeah. Move around.
Move around. Yeah. It's one of the ways to do it. But like in the tale, they don't do that. So I think it's funny. But there are many versions. Maybe in some they do, and then some they don't. But at the point, like they talk and they describe to one another, but describing is not the whole thing. You won't be able to understand everything if you only talk. So how did it started?
About a year ago, both of us have been in Rome. I guess a lot of you as well. I remember the faces. And we had the pleasure to share some early experiences on how to use EDGY. And it was a workshop and it was a talk. And after our sessions, we realized we were talking about very similar things, even though we didn't talk before. You know, like we talked a little bit, and of course there's the EDGY Slack, but we came up to similar conclusions, or we identified similar patterns. And this to us was like, oh, interesting. We should talk about more. We should talk more about that.
Yeah. And since EDGY was fairly new and is still fairly young, we're still figuring out these patterns. And that was interesting for us, like to just to say, okay, we came up with the same like dynamic of how things are connected, how they move around, and then say, okay, let's talk more about StratEDGY, because I think with over time, we are going to spot these patterns as a group. And we put a lot of thought into figuring out these different patterns based on StratEDGY, how it works, and everything. So that will be a journey of what we figure out throughout this year. So this was part of my conference last year. I did a 7 map people map, facet model, the famous Milky Way map, and how we can use it in different level of complexity. So that was the basic of what I worked on to start to figure out these patterns.
Yeah, I also figured out some things, and you can look up the talk. And the interesting thing is that we had very similar patterns. Like we all both have like the zoom in, we had to go in circles. So we thought, okay, let's bring our minds together and figure out what could be edgy for people who want or need to do something with strategy. So a little bit about how this came together. Maybe on the further slides. Yeah, we found some patterns, and then I guess we get tricked into creating a tool, and kind of said, okay, yeah, we will do that. Actually, I think it's an awesome idea, and with the help of Wolfgang, we kind of kickstarted this process. And it's not just us. There's many people. I think we forgot some heads on the slides that are somewhere in there. But it's, I think, in the Slack channel about 8 or 9 people that all contributed at some point by giving feedback, by giving ideas. So basically, we started to figure out how could this tool look like. And yeah,
so
it's a journey. Yeah? Like it's for us, it has been a journey of a year, starting last October, and I think we can click through a bit quicker. Yeah. I said there's many of you. Some of you are not on the picture right here. So this is a collaborative effort, and we had 3 main trigger questions. Like the first one was, of course, what if we codify our consulting practices? Like we had projects, we had experiences, and what if we could abstract this to a level, codify it, that it's a general tool? And we had maybe 4, 5, 6 drafts of this, from a basic process like ABCD to a fictive conversation with chatbots, to like there's a whole Miro-bot full of experimentation. But we have not been really happy with this approach. So we also tried another approach. And the other approach was like, what if we create popular tools that everybody knows? Because we figured out we don't want to start new. We don't want to create the 11th standard.
So throughout the year, we try, okay, so if you know the double diamond and the design thinking, it would look like if we put it on top. And I've done a lot of design sprints throughout the years, which is triple diamond, so another variation of the double in the design thinking thing. We went for the 10th type of innovation, and we call them the 12th type of innovation. So instead of being the 10 type that are in the original strategy in the book, we went for all the elements that we use. We tried the business model Canva and the proposition value. We tried, which one did we try? The Blue Ocean?
Most of them, actually. We went through even old Porter theories and through a lot of the more modern stuff. And the interesting thing is we figured out we could edgify mostly anything. Just put it as a layer on top and you create a more colorful version of the popular tools. And it's also interesting because it's a connecting language somehow. So suddenly we were able to connect those various tools. But we have not been quite happy with this. So we also tried another approach.
Yeah. And one thing we figured out is that, do we really want to do a conference about just putting EDGY on top of the business model Canvas? Is it worth it to have a full hour? Meh. So we tried to figure out what it could be, how can we make it its own thing there?
Yeah. So making it its own thing, one approach was to figure out what are current really good practices, like good frameworks that already collect the tools that are known and well known and kind of bring them in an order so that we don't have to reinvent that wheel. We did that. It was very interesting. Also not 100% where we wanted to go. So it's a journey.
It's a journey, yeah. It's just like trying to figure out where India is, and you end up in America. It's a journey. So we travel through, and we are where we are today, and we think we find some pretty interesting places. So what did we learn?
What did we learn? We have, I think, 3 pitfalls that we observed that are quite common to the projects that are somehow strategy related that we worked on. And we are trying to figure out like how could EDGY be a different approach to the ones that are very classical to avoid those pitfalls. So what follows now is a quick walkthrough these 3 pitfalls and possible approaches to solve them. And there's some hint in it how EDGY can make the difference.
So the first pitfall, it's what we call the dominant logic. So it's kind of the elephant problem where usually like you see, yeah, I think this elephant is a snake problem. So we all from our discipline see different things because we have different backgrounds and we all bias towards what we learn, our past experience. And this is why usually we try to co-create to have all these experience coming along together. So I can let you read it. I'll just pop up my timer, but usually let's say you have a growth problem and your enterprise want to improve the kind of thing like every team based on these the facet model will vary greatly. So some people will think strategy, product backlog, some architecture, brand, you name it. So these are kind of a classical things and bias from different disciplines.
Yes, and this typically leads to meeting where people from no matter which group it is, we figured out it's very similar to either it's a board meeting or it's a C-level meeting or it's a working group. You end up with a lot of different perspectives and people come with some knowledge that they have, some dominant logic and some mindsets, and they end up with trying to sell their perspective, their truth.
You probably been a couple of time in this discussion, and we'll talk for the user experience part since it's my background. We always end up with people being angry because we did not respect the user. Well, it's not aligned with the purpose or the strategy, or it's just not possible to do it based on time, money, budget, or just we don't have the technology yet. So the dark pattern.
Yeah, the dark pattern. Everybody tries to sell their point of view, their dominant logic. It's kind of a thing about like there's this theory about purpose that if you create something, it gives you purpose. So everybody wants to try to sell their creation, their understanding. And there's also some theory about having the power of interpretation, like the last say how it is. Quite often this is a financial perspective in enterprises, but not always. So basically people are not really working together, not collaborating. They're maybe creating a puzzle, but it's not really a mosaic that is a beautiful picture on its own.
And this is where usually we talked about like, let's talk about the elephant. So the dark pattern is like people going to meeting, they talk and they try to connect. But if you ask them to draw the elephant, it's still going to be different elephant shape sizes because they are going to draw the part that they know and that they touched. Else, what we want to do or where we're going with strategy is to enable this conversation, drawing, mapping in order to have and to ask people, let's draw the elephant, and everybody actually draw an elephant. Where if you take a single strategy methodology, you will end up with different kinds of elephants for the same problem.
So there's the people, and those people come with their rucksacks of beliefs and stuff. And there's also the content, or let's say the challenge, the mission that you have, that you want to solve. And we figured out it's quite helpful to have these 2 simple maps in the beginning to figure out, okay, what are our perspectives and maybe what's our shared perspective? So people can align around this shared perspective. I think we heard that before. Must not be a KPI, but could be something common ground. And it's kind of like team forming in the beginning, right? Sometimes you do have established teams, but usually when you start with a new challenge, it's helpful to do this again, this exercise, to figure out what are our personal perspectives, beliefs, strengths, what we could add.
And these are pretty obvious starting point. All my enterprise design initiative with EDGY started with these things, but instead of plainly asking who should join the meeting, actually use the map. And there's a thing that is happening all the time is that when you have a map with these 6 facets and there's a hole, people want to fill the gap. So if you have nobody into the organization and human resources, people say, why is this empty? So that probably means we need to gather someone. But it's the same thing for why is there nobody? Nobody in the architecture? Well, we need to invite someone from the architecture because that's what we're doing. And instead of just try to thinking on top of our mind, who and what, the models enable that cross-discipline to come and have all the vision, not only part of the elephant. So use this map. People will fill the gap because there are some discomfort when there are holes in these maps.
So we figured that there are a few traits that we hint you to think about when you use them and when not, because we think they are really helpful in this process. Which is being curious, which is being courageous, which is having empathy, and which is having endurance or perseverance. And maybe you found the word facilitator before on one of the slides. We believe that having those sessions facilitated can really create the space to pull out these virtues of people and also to kind of create this shared room where you explore together.
Second one.
Yeah, the capability.
You want to go with?
Sure. So StratEDGY is a 10-year plan.
Is it? Okay. Sorry, it's a 10-year theory. Okay. Yeah. You want to grab the picker for this one?
I grabbed the picker for this
one.
I'm
going to grab some water. And
we have so many understandings of strategy as we have people, and then probably even more, right? So it's really not easy to agree what strategy actually is. We try to figure it out for us, like a working definition, like that we can work with. There is some trending things, some pattern. You can ask any of the models, they will give you some idea. They will argue, okay, so many people say this and that, or you can look at LinkedIn at the influence answers what they say. But it's not really clear. And since it's a complicated discussion and can become academic quite fast, organizations sometimes just outsource it. So they don't really have this capability in-house, but they use trusted advisors to tell them, okay, this is the truth. And this is kind of a dark pattern because things won't stick. They will leave the house the moment the trusted advisor is out of house, and there will be little ownership. So in StratEDGY, we try to rather enable this strategic thinking, strategy practice capability, than to like bring it in and then go out again. So in order to make it stick, there needs to be a certain agreement on what is strategy, at least for this context. There also needs to be a process that enables the people and brings them in so they can create this ownership, so they can make the capability stick and build on what they have. And one of the challenges, and we will go into this a bit later, is to balance this resource. Probably all of you know that if you're in the daily operations, they are quite performance orientated. So you have like a lot of your mind to do, probably juggle a lot of different themes and projects and ideas. And then somebody asks you, and now on top of this learn, right? But there's no mental capacity anymore to on top of this learn. So what you do is you use the patterns and the tools that you know that you're secure with. So one part that we figured out is it's quite important to start with the tools that people are comfortable with and then create the space where they can build on this. So what is strategy really? Maybe some of you know Henry Mintzberg. He's Canadian, and he spent a lot of time figuring out what strategy is really. So he wrote this famous book, Strategy Safari, sometime in like late 80s. And he said there's the 5 Ps because he wanted to have a perspective what it is. And the interesting thing is that he takes an approach that we quite value and also took, which is not sitting in the room and thinking about it, what it could be, but rather asking people who do strategy what they're actually doing. And what they're actually doing is they plan. They say they do strategy if they do a plan. There's a lot of discussion whether strategy is planning or not. They say it's a pattern, it's emerging. Basically, they only know it when looking in the mirror. They say it's a ploy, or you can say tactics, like how to outmaneuver in a certain situation, but have this framework, how to outmaneuver. They say it's a position. This is more the marketing branding, like how do you position yourself in relation to others. They say it's a perspective, kind of the visionary thinking, like where to go. They say it's all of this or some of this, or depending on the context. And some 10 to 20 years after this first book was published, the pattern of strategy as a practice evolved. It's something that a lot of the scholars talk about now, so it's another P, the art of doing strategy, actually.
So,
a lot of people talk about choices.
Yeah, so the basic definition that we started with was one of Roger Martin, who wrote a book, How to Win. And a strategy is a set of choices that position the company uniquely to have a sustainable, superior value compared to the competition. So I think it was a good starting point, at least for my journey, for my comprehension, because it's broad enough to get a sense of, okay, what's a strategy? But what we wanted to do is a StratEDGY and to figure out and to go further than that. So if strategy is a set of choice, StratEDGY is a focused set of choice that explore, imagine, realize, and sustain the stakeholder value across all the intersection. So at the beginning, we said every discipline have their own strategic approach. What we want to do with strategy is to sustain these activities together and make sure it's connected. So is it a strategy to come up with strategy? Or is it strategy how to sustain all these strategy and connect them together? And this is what we figured out throughout the year by testing all of these, because they all have gaps.
Yes. So we had an agreement on our various perspectives, how to go forward.
And it was multiple bold statements, and I'm not sure, I don't agree. Here's a new reference, and like, how do we figure out what this word means? Yeah.
It's a mess, but at least we agreed to untangle it to a certain point that we have a working definition for us to go forward with this.
Always respectfully, though.
Yes.
Okay.
And one of the patterns that we explored doing this is that there is at least a correlation. Maybe it's not true, but we think it's helpful to think about this, that depending on your context, a certain interpretation of what is strategy could be helpful for you.
So some of your ambition, problem, or opportunities will be more complex than other, and some will be complicated and clear. And the more complex you are, the more you should go into a strategic, unique strategy, because you have no reference. The solution could be in any discipline or in multiple disciplines. And the clearer, simpler the problem or the ambition is, the more you should lean towards existing strategy and to apply them, not to reinvent the wheel. So sometimes we have just a, I don't know, simple e-com problem or any problem that you can think of that is actually, yeah, we've done that 200 times before. There are some strategic patterns, just like the business model Canva. There are some patterns in some business model. You just put the pattern and you choose one. You get some a bit of information here and there and you figure it out. But if you have a new wicked problem, complex, you don't know where the solution is, you need into the unique strategy part, or you need to think it that it's going to be something unique. And this will give you different behavior because the more unique it is, the more complex it is, the more you need to intertwine these disciplines. And the more simpler, clearer the problem is, the more there are patterns, the more it's about having a clear goal, a strong communication part, and you need to agree on the specific strategic approach. And the complexity is active collaboration, openness, and discomfort to go along the theme of this week.
So you could also use it in a way to argue to your decision makers that maybe using the classic Porter matrix is not the right approach because the situation you're in is too dynamic to actually choose from one of those patterns, but you have to think a bit further. And then you start the conversation, okay, what's actually, if maybe some of you have been to the Estuarine mapping, what's influencing the situation? So then you can figure out who is actually relevant to bring into this place.
Roger Martin. So we took his strategy definition, and I saw in some article, but not in some article, but in some books, like he said, he was a trusted external advisor for Procter & Gamble for the CEO. So even like in his definition, you can see he has a very top-down bias. So he was on top. So when we realize what's the context of that person, which is not mine, we needed to rebalance a thing and think about what that strategy statement meant from his point of view.
And there's tools that you use. Again, the people map is super helpful. This is probably the stage where you go through a compass a little bit deeper and start with simple maps to figure out, okay, how are things interrelated? And then there is this thing of the balance, like how much do you really want to change and do new? Are you even able to? Can you use a pattern that is already there? Do you use tools that are already there?
And I think for also the simple map, what we tend to do, or at least what I tend to do at the beginning, is to list a bunch of things. And now it's about listing as less as possible in every category. So 5-3 capabilities, 5-3 task, and figuring out what is core. And what is core and what is the most important is part of your strategic discussion. So no long list, just make it as less element as possible in this one. And then find the balance between these elements. Yeah.
If you do this, another dark pattern will pop up. The one about accountability, like who's actually making the decisions. The decision of who's in, who's out, what is the perspective that you want to use.
It's supposed to be the third dark pattern, but we have updated the slide and it's the yesterday's PDF. But sorry.
Typically, top management decides. Top down. In some companies I worked for, nobody really knew what is the strategy because it was like a secret of the top management. Seriously, no, not kidding. Yeah. And I also noted that there's a theory about meaning and about purpose from Viktor Frankl, and it's about creation. So if you're not involved in the creation of the strategy, it doesn't mean too much to you. You know, it's just some paper somewhere. And also, if you outsource it to a trusted advisor, you kind of like keep the control. You can control the external people, but you're giving it away. You're not really thinking on yourself what the strategy should do, right?
So if, let's say, we ask people to spend 100 hours to figure out the problem, they will be autonomous for a long time. As if we ask external, you receive a sheet of paper, you have a 1-hour presentation, and then you go figure it out, which is not really working.
So engaging in the topic and making it your own, we think it's a quite important thing. And also, of course, you have this typical various conflicts between maybe what should be the strategic goals and what is your operational performance goals, because they come from prior strategy initiative. So it's a mess usually. And in StratEDGY, we figured if we agree on the governance, like you said, use time X to figure it out, right? So it's a governance thing. And if we build on what we already have and try to enrich this, and if we try to balance the amount of new thinking, we had this various waves of transformation, and you get this backslash from each wave. So at some point, people are just like, oh, yeah, and sit it out until the next strategy comes. We're getting into a more of a collaborative act, and this can make it stick a bit more.
One of the things that Roger Martin also acknowledged, and he said he haven't figured out, is that it should not be top down or bottom up. It should go back and forth all the time. But like the quote that I said before, he said that he hasn't figured it out yet. And this is when I said, I'm smarter than Roger Martin. Let's figure it out. Or maybe not.
So
we'll see.
There's this other pattern, this kind of zooming in and going in and out.
So since you haven't figured it out, what I try to do is to reflect on what actually happened, because it's very rare that I do my strategic approach and it starts from the top and it goes all the way to the bottom. So three quick stories on how we change zoom level based on the facilitation part of my work. So this one is Quebec Tech. So we actually started on the top level for this one, a big vision. Let's reinvent the enterprise. Let's figure out how Quebec Tech can move from a local ecosystem to a global ecosystem for startup to grow outside the country. Montreal, world. So it's a big change in process, product, and everything. So we started with that. Give us your vision. That's good. Then like, okay, you have a team, we need to figure out. So we go one layer below. We ask the different teams and we included the identity people, the product and the architecture. Okay, how we're going to do it, how it's going to, what are the key components. And then we kind of ended up at the end on the more zoomed in level for our intervention. Who should we hire to go through that vision? Because the vision widely change. So a big vision manifesto, more of a core strategy conversation. And now the first step was to select the 20 people that can enable this vision. And then with all these elements, they could at some point move on more easily. And they move on. They took this person, they went back and create the rest of the enterprise in order to activate the vision. So this one we started on top. The other one was actually Aliments Quebec, which was an audit. We've been asked to audit a software. And okay, so let's audit, like, what we've created, is it good? Is it bad? Where do we go? How do we stand? It was a bit of a user experience, but a lot on the architecture side and IT side. So, okay, we did all these audits. It takes a bunch of hours, 300 hours, 400 hours. We analyze this stuff. We do some graph. So we started pretty much at the bottom. And then, okay, we figure out where our the main problem is. We go back to zoom out. We go back to the identity people. We say, okay, here's what's happening. Now we need to figure out a way to shift based on what we know, what we have. Do you agree to change the strategy and to move in it? And then we go back into the working force and say, what's the product? What's the experience we want? And then, okay, let's prepare what we have. And this was the conclusion. And then we go back to a very low level of precision with all that documentation and all this hard work. And the other one, it was a new museum that would open in a year in Quebec City. And they wanted IoT in their museum. So it's a very broad, we want IoT, so it's very zoomed out. But they asked us to help us with the technology. And then I'll say, okay, let's go with the working team, with the people that are going to work in this, and just do a mid-level kind of analysis. We kind of want that. We kind of want this. Like, why do we want that? Why does the museum want this? Why does the government want this? Why does the museum want this? And each exposition has their own why. So we try to make it quick, but make everything work together in vertically. And then, okay, we had the vision, the strategy for the IoT. We went with people from IT, technology, let's figure it out. And then we move back all the way to the top to have a broad vision, how we are going to make it happen with the vision, the experience, and the people from the architecture. So, and this is where I think if you usually have a high strategic role, you don't tend to go all the way down and talk to the people and do the work manually. As a facilitator, usually I enter from the middle, the top, I can go anywhere. But EDGY and the model enables us to say there are some gap. I will fill the gap, and we are allowed to go a bit on every Zoom level and in every team.
So, a lot of talk. I hope interesting. Let's conclude really quickly. We have some dark patterns, typically the dominant logic. So you look at things only from one perspective, for example, only from an architecture perspective or from a business perspective. In StratEDGY, we try to look holistically. And the facet diagram, the facet model, helps us to do that. Typically, trusted advisors are used to create strategy, usually from outside, and they usually bring pattern instead of individual stuff. And we think it's more helpful if you have somebody who facilitates and leaves the ownership to the strategy in the company. Typically, it's quite limited to top management, but we believe it makes more sense if it's a network and you can use the zoom in and zoom out approach to figure out what is actually the network required to bring in all the capabilities, all the skills. And typically there's kind of this goal cascade, right? So many times I got the task, hey, we have this strategy, could you like cascade it for unit X? Yeah.
So it's, yeah, vision, mission, and then we go into objectives and then KPIs.
Please create the annual goals from the strategy, right? Like a machine. And actually, we think it's more like a fractal system, and it's quite helpful to think like that. So you can apply the same tools, the same pattern on each level, no matter where you are. And you can start on each level, which is actually what we do in real life. You know, sometimes we create the IT strategy first before the enterprise strategy is even there, because people are too slow. But we need to fix some things. So we need to give guidance to people. So we do the IT strategy first. And by using a certain similar approach, which EDGY is, you can use this fractal approach on each level, on a project, on a whole enterprise, on a part of the organization. And the strategy emerges, and you can then connect them much easier and have more of a loose coupling than the fixed coupling of the classical goal systems. So, the benefits of EDGY. Want to take this?
We try to to make it not a step by step, but kind of categories there. We tried a lot of configuration, what to do next for them, but there's so many configuration. But basically, the benefits of using it that way is that StratEDGY like helps you discover and then focus and then zoom in and then zoom out. It's very natural to do it when you have these canvas and these tools, which we will show a bit more after. And then at some point, when you kind of have the whole vision and the right people, you can go into the explore and imagine mode. So this is where usually I say, oh, okay, so you need a design sprint, or maybe we go into the business model canvas. So the first discover and focus help you kind of figuring out in which area you should choose and which discipline strategic approach you should go forward after. And then, you have the zoom in and decide. And then at some point, you will need to implement, sustain, and you will try to come back on the sustain, implement part, and to go back into, okay, here's a new problem, here's a new opportunity. So hopefully, when you keep your board well tracked and well cleaned, then say what you choose, what you decide not to do, it's easier to go back into the discover focus. It's going to accelerate over time.
Yeah. So this would be like the high level plan. If you need to sell it and to do it, this is the one page.
The 4 easy steps to
strategy. Yeah. And the icons, the images, they already hint you what's going on there. But what's really going on? this is how we do it at the moment.
So this is probably the bunch of slides that you might want to download after and like reuse as here's a more text and more step-by-step-ish.
Yeah.
And like we said, it was a journey. We know what we need to go to do to move it forward, but it's a pretty good job for the task at hand, I think. So yeah, there needs to be some sort of a meme or reference at some point. So the way we do it is we gather around a big table and then we try to conquer other territories.
We start to focus. Focus is so important. It's one of the powerful things that strategy can give is focus. So you know, like, what would be the next step? What would be the next direction?
And I think this is I know I'm bringing that a lot, but like that first step, deciding, talking about the ambition and bringing the right people, is the first discomfort zone usually. Well, we don't usually invite these people, not the same point of view, and this is where things start happening.
And probably you heard the notion that strategy is also the bridge between the qualitative and the quantitative. So we start with the qualitative, we maybe have some heuristics, but we're not really on so much evidence at this moment, right? So we start on this side. And we start with the people. This can be like a 5-minute exercise, or this can be a 2 or 4 day workshop. You can use this for a team. If you just start up a team, you can use this for the whole enterprise. It's quite fractal, right? And it's about the people, and it's about figuring out what drives them, what gives them the perspective. And it's built upon things like knowledge management theory, about engagement theory, etc. You probably have read this in one or the other way. You can read a bit more about it in Jim Collins' book from some years ago. He said it's about figuring out what is the point in the middle that everybody agrees on. And we think it's a very good exercise to do in every strategy project in the beginning, so that you bring together all the perspectives. You are really clear about what are the capabilities that are in the house, what might be some hidden beliefs that hinder or accelerate, and what are the stories that inform your transitions, what are the tasks that drive them. So to have a little bit more focus where you are and where you want to go. And similar to having the people aligned, you need to figure out, okay, what's really the playing field. So you can do this, for example, with the concept of circle of control. I like this a lot, because usually people come with a trigger and say, okay, we need AI, right? And then you can start to explore, okay, where is actually our playing field? Is our playing field the ecosystem, because we are the ones who create the super intelligence?
And I think on this slide is that with EDGY, we tend to focus on what's on the map, because that's the map we have and there are some gap and we feel it. But we often forget the outside of the enterprise. So you have the circle of what you just mentioned?
Basically, you have the circle of influence. That is the one that is outside your organization, your enterprise. You can tackle that with the universe map, for example.
I have the universe map, or you could just do like we say it's pastel, so political. I don't know, like a politic environment, but try to not forget the outside of your EDGY diagram.
Yeah. The farthest outside circle is things that influence you. Right? So there's some tech trends that influence you, some societal trends that influence you, some politics that influence you, but you can't really do much about it because you're not creating the super intelligence. You may be building some application on top of something. So you should be aware of that. This is the dynamics that influence your playing field, but it's not your playing field. And then you have this next inner circle. This is where you can influence. So you can lobby with some politicians. You can buy a certain technology. You can make some advertisement. but it's not really in your control. And in your control is probably somewhere inside of your enterprise. And if you take it on a less bird's eye perspective, this could be the same if you're in some unit and have some project. Like, let's create a chatbot for our first level support. Then you probably have some certain influence on the branding, but you have no control about it. So you have to align what you do with that. And it's very helpful to figure that out in the beginning. So once you know what your playing field is, what facets are relevant, therefore what people are relevant, which perspectives you have, you can dive in and imagine your ambition and explore your baseline.
And this is where you try at that point, or it will be easier to figure out what tools to use, design thinking, design sprint, or like we mentioned, Euros cookbook, where there's a 600 page of canvas, and like you need to figure out what's your playing field, your context, to figure out the right tool. So this one, yeah, business model, Canva, design thinking, Blue Ocean, whatever you know, and use something you're comfortable with. I think it's one of the most important.
Yeah. So it's kind of this going back and forth between what is your vision that you agree on a very high level, and then you zoom to the today and you estimate map or you do whatever. So in a recent workshop where it was about creating the new strategy or perspective for the whole product portfolio, we didn't give them any canvases to fill out, or we didn't give them, basically the input for the workshops was 5 simple questions that were surrounded on the previous slides. So to make them bring what they have already. And then we ended up in a room with a lot of various diagrams. You know, some people came with some value streams, some people came with the brand brochure, some people like really mixed. But this way we figured out, okay, you already have these competencies, these tools, and this is what we can build on. Also, people brought their ownership of what they created. So they took on ownership for the topic. So again, we can use this kind of future state and current state and fill the gaps and use the map, usually start on a high level and then sometimes zoom in and see, okay, the things that we brought, where would they be located? How can you connect them? These leading questions is a very powerful thing. I use them a lot. It gives the people the room to bring in their focus.
What we also figured out, like at the beginning of EDGY, we had definitions and people would figure it out. But when I'm doing the facilitation, actually, I figured out that EDGY is at its most powerful when you figure the right question. And these questions enable the discussion. And as a facilitator, the less you talk, the more people talk, the more these connections are being created. So to me, the EDGY strategy is pretty much a big and powerful conversation tools.
Exactly. So if you go to the next dialogue, it's about imagining what shifts if you try to realize your preferred future. What's different, right? And if you figure out what might be shifting, you can also figure out what could be the actions that you take within your circle of influence or control. And this helps you also to make the decisions that you need. So basically, you're now building decision trees, right? We heard strategies about choice. And there's one approach how you can do that. That is quite simple. That was one too far. You figure out like the big change that you want to have in your circle, in your environment, or for your company, and you put it on the top in the long term. And then you kind of ask the questions like, okay, what would be something that is in our control towards this big hairy goal, right? What would be a good first step? And what shifts then for our target groups? What's different tomorrow if we take this action? So you try to kind of figure out the near shifts that are in reach, that you can imagine that there will happen towards the big shift that you want. And this can be like just a brainstorm exercise, or this can be interviews, or this, you know, the various formats how you moderate it. We did this a lot in quite quick workshops, so quite high level and totally not complete, but raises the awareness for where's the impact actually, right? Because the shift that is happening is the impact. Milan and I had this discussion about this one dating service, and they did a very small shift that had a big impact. Like they just switched who starts the conversation, not the man anymore, but the woman. And this little shift can go towards a big thing. It's about discovering these small shifts. If you have these shifts, you can figure out what are the actions, and you can again use EDGY to figure out, okay, based on the connections, based on the other facets, what actions could you take? For example, you might take an action that sets a certain purpose in your organization, or you might need to tell a different story in your organization about your work there in order to create this shift. Or you need to build a certain capability to create this shift. Or you need a new product, some product innovation to create this shift. So you can move then again clockwise, counterclockwise, zoom in, have this discussion using the EDGY tools and elements in order to figure out what would be the right actions, what would have to be true in order for this shift to actually happen.
Then again, one big part of the magic is that it's a StratEDGY, EDGY, and all the tools, when they are mapped, is that it's continuous and can really connect other disciplines together, because everybody is able to track back why in the decision making. And most of the time when you're on the unique complex problem, this is where sometimes you need to zoom out and reread these things.
So after step 3, you have figured out all the things that you could do, but then you have this gap. How do we realize it, right? It's fantastic to know what you could do, but how do you get it stick? So you need to sustain the practice, and you need to deliver it, and you need to figure out when to deliver what. And we had this beautiful, again, S-terrain, where you check the energy over the time. So this is something how you could figure it out. We also had the discussion that there's other approaches that you could take to figure out what to do next that go beyond, okay, budget times efforts. And this, what we've seen a lot in our projects is a key to making it stick is to connect it to the everyday business, like to not put it on top, but to have it there. You can already do that with using tools that people are using, but it's also about a decision about how much time goes where, what capacity goes where. So to sustain this practice, maybe some of you know this model. It's from theory about resilient organizations, and you can look at this as there's sliders between the top and the bottom fields. So the top fields would be, okay, we do business as usual. We run our stuff. And the lighter blue circle would be, okay, we create innovation. We organize differently. We do something. And you can move this slider and say, okay, it's 80-20, it's 40-60, it's however you feel makes sense. But it's a strategic decision to figure out what capacity do you want to assign to your buckets in order to get your strategy delivered. Because if you do not decide to do that, people will have to do it on top of their job, and then they will use their old patterns and there will be no change. So this is how you give direction from the top down. And also it's an indicator how you need to lead it, because if you move your slider to one perspective, then there's a lot of uncertainty. So if you have a lot of uncertainty, you need a different type of leadership. You can't just manage it, right? So you need to enable the people to deal with the uncertainty. So this is a good discussion for the decision makers, whomever they are, to be aware what it means to implement and to deliver and to create the room that activates the delivery. And then you start planning. So this is the connection to planning. Some of you might know portfolio management, classic portfolio management. You map your things and you decide what to do next. So you map your shifts, the big shifts. And you have the actions, and they're either in an exploration phase, you explore if it's good or not, and then maybe based on some definitions of done, you move them up to an imagination phase, and you figure out, okay, how could this be solved? And at some point you focus this again and make some more or some less and go back or go forth. So you can move to all those little steps. And this will guide you towards a delivery that is in balance. So again, on this field, this is usually a discussion that is between weekly and quarterly, depending on where you zoom in or zoom out. This could be your management meeting, where you always ask, what did we do already? What's working? Where are we stuck? What do we do next? And then use something like the energy times time matrix to figure out, okay, which one do we do next? Where's the focus? So, a lot. I hope it was understandable. And we are super curious of all those things that we were talking about, the dark patterns, the light patterns, the tools. What's resonating with you? Like, where would you put the democracy red dot that you say, okay, I can apply this tomorrow?